Hi guys, hi EO Philippines. Allow me to introduce our moderator this afternoon. Our moderator today is always front and center of local, national, and international news, being a practicing broadcast journalist for the past 24 years and running. She studied and she finished management at De La Salle University and took courses in journalism in University of California, LA. EO Philippines, please welcome my friend and the chief senior correspondent of CNN Philippines, Pinky Webb.
Thank you, Leah. I am happy to be amongst all of you. I will introduce our speaker for today. Our expert guest for today is one of our own. Yes, I'm part of you guys today. A former member of Spousal Forum HC, Dr. Marysia Recto is an allergist and immunologist. She is also the section head of allergy and immunology at the Asian Hospital and is an active staff at the Makati Medical Center. She's also a professor at the UPPGH. Last year, Marysia was the president of the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, PSAAI. So let's all welcome Dr. Marysia Recto.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Pinky, for that wonderful introduction. I'd like to say hello to my former Spousal Forums HC. I can see some of you there. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be invited to you by you to lecture about this very hot topic now, which is basically about the COVID vaccines and whether we should take that shot. So it's a very hot topic because right now we're in the midst of this pandemic and we are also waiting for a solution and we are looking towards the vaccines to provide that. But we should also be aware as the vaccinees of what kind of vaccines we have in the market and also what possible reactions can occur after vaccination. So as of Feb 21, 2021, there are almost 111 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. And this has really been going up. We see now in our country, there's really a huge surge. And globally, at that time, there were around 2.5 confirmed million deaths, and it has affected many countries. So there are really no country that has been spared. So I belong to the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, and we came up with some position statements regarding the COVID-19 vaccines and their adverse reactions as of Feb 1, 2021. And recently, we're actually updating this in the next few days. So for those who would like to read more about it, if you look here at the lower right hand of the screen, you will actually see our website wherein you can actually view these documents. And this is for public use. So this position paper was developed really in response to the concerns of many healthcare workers and the lay regarding adverse reactions to COVID-19 vaccines, especially allergic reactions. So we're seeing some patients or some individuals who are very hesitant to receive the vaccine because of many things they've heard, or maybe they have read it and their interpretation may not be accurate. But for any kind of treatment, we always want to provide a balance between efficacy. Efficacy means that it works, but at the same time, it should be safe. So we have to have that balance in order for us to have good management and hopefully control of disease. So these are the objectives of my talk. First, to discuss the immune response to COVID-19 infections in order to understand how the vaccine will work, and also to present the different COVID-19 vaccines and their efficacy rates, mainly how good they work, and to discuss reactogenic and allergic reactions to COVID-19 vaccines and management. So this talk was initially given to doctors. And so I will try to simplify it the best I can so that you can understand it. And also, hopefully, if you have more questions in the Q&A, we can bring this up. So before we understand the vaccines, we have to understand how the COVID-19 infects us. So the COVID-19 is a virus, and the virus is really not a living object. It is like a parasite. It contains genetic material for it to replicate. And in the COVID-19 virus, this kind of genetic material is called the RNA. Okay? And you see that the unique feature of the virus is the presence of these spike proteins. These spike proteins that surround the virus actually enable it to attach to certain what we call receptors found on the surface of our cells. And these cells could be your respiratory tract cells like your lungs, your nasal mucosa, even your gastrointestinal tract cells can accept this virus. And inside the virus, or rather inside the host cell, these viral particles are released. So the RNA is released inside the host cell. And because it is a parasite, it will use the host cell's materials to replicate itself. And thus you would have generation of viral proteins. Now, as the virus is released into the host cell, there will be a phenomenon called pyroptosis. It's like a very explosive inflammatory reaction that will cause cell death. And this will lead, of course, to symptoms. Now, in an individual, two things may happen. 20% of the world's population who are infected with COVID-19 can develop what we call the cytokine storm. This is a very dysfunctional, a very strong immune response to the virus that will lead to destruction of cells. So in the attempt of the body to try to combat the virus, you would have a very destructive immune reaction. And this is what leads people to the emergency room and can even lead them to death. But 80% of individuals will have what we call the mild infections or even asymptomatic infections, wherein the individual's own immune system can actually combat the virus. And how can this be done? It's because there are cells within our immune system that can engulf these viruses and kill them. And also we have certain immune cells like what we call your T cells and B cells that also directly kill viruses. And also they generate antibodies. These antibodies are designed to neutralize the virus and thus prevent it from entering the host cell. So this is basically the normal response that a patient would have usually. That's why many patients will have mild symptoms. They will not have any complications. And this is actually the kind of immune reaction that the vaccine hopes to generate. So when we have an immune reaction against any virus, there are two parts of our immunity that are involved. We have the first line of defense. This is what we call the soldiers or the foot soldiers of the immune responses, the innate immune system, wherein they can actually produce products like the interferon gamma that will prevent the virus from replicating, or there are cells that directly kill the virus. And then there are adaptive immune reactions that will allow productions of the neutralizing antibodies. So these are the antibodies that we test, to see if you already got it, you got infected, but at the same time, it indicates a form of immunity. And this can actually last for a long period of time, depending upon the organism. But sometimes it's a short-lived immunity. And when the patient gets exposed again to the virus, then it can be generated again. These antibodies are generated again because of what we call memory. So you see two important things happen by the, provided by the immune system. Would be first is protecting against infection, and the second is to eradicate the established infection. So how do vaccines work? Well, a vaccine is really a tiny, weakened, non-dangerous fragment of the organism, and that includes part of the antigen. So the antigen is a fragment that generates an immune reaction. And so this will be enough for our body to learn to build a specific antibody, so that if the body encounters the antigen later again as part of the real organism, it already knows how to defeat it. So the main objective of the immune reaction is to produce these antibodies and other immune reactions like your T cells and B cells to have a holistic immune reaction. So vaccines have been here for more than 100 years. And you see that there are many kinds of organisms by which vaccines have been produced because they have found the existing antibodies. And now we are faced with this new pathogen, this new organism called SARS-CoV-2, wherein we do not have yet the antibodies. That's why a lot of people are getting quite severe reactions, because our system or our population does not yet have the antibodies. So the aim of a vaccine is to try to reach what we call herd immunity, wherein many of the people around the world already have the immune reaction, they have the antibodies, and that maybe those that could not receive the vaccine are already protected by the fact that majority of the world's population already has the antibody. So that is what we call herd immunity. And that is what we want to achieve. But the WHO has actually pegged that to get herd immunity, around 80% of the world's population should be vaccinated. So you see, if we do not do our part in having the vaccine, then we will not achieve herd immunity and we will not get out of the situation we are in. So here are the different types of vaccines for COVID-19. This slide gives you an overview of the 4 types of vaccines that are either in the market or present abroad or are in the pipeline. So we have here the viral vector vaccine that contain a harmless virus that has been altered, that contains the COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 mRNA genetic code for the spike protein. And the RNA viruses are those that contain genetic material of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, because it is a mRNA vaccine that also is generated to try to produce the spike protein. So it is not the whole virus that is replicated once the host is injected. It is just the spike protein. And because as you've seen, the spike protein is the one that is the most virulent factor. It allows the virus to enter. So you want to prevent or make antibodies against the spike protein. But there are also other viruses that are in the market. So we have the whole virus vaccines, which are inactivated or killed vaccines, or the protein subunits, which are portions of the vaccines, or portions rather of the SARS-CoV-2 that will trigger an immune reaction not only against the spike protein, but also against other parts of the viral particle, and thus theoretically would produce a more holistic immune reaction. So let's go briefly into each of these different vaccines. So we have the genetic vaccines or the nucleic acid vaccines that contain the SARS-CoV-2 genetic material template. So this is your DNA or RNA. So the host cell, once injected into our system, our cells will use the genetic material to make the spike protein. And this spike protein is now recognized as foreign, and our immune system will generate immune reactions against it, mainly neutralizing antibodies. So these kind of vaccines are actually very fast to develop because you're already using the template of the virus. It is low cost, but the problem is that it has to be stored at very low temperatures. Examples of this are the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, and they are still in clinical trials for COVID-19 around the world. Then we have the viral vector vaccines. This viral vector involves a harmless virus. So there is an adenovirus that is actually rendered harmless. And this virus will be like the messenger of the SARS-CoV-2 genetic material, and it will be delivered into the host after injection. And then in the host, you would have release of the genetic material, and hence you have production of spike protein and immune reaction to that. So it generates very strong immune responses, but it needs to be stored at low temperatures. So an example in human use is the Ebola vaccine. So unlike the mRNA vaccines, which have not yet been used in clinical practice in human, this particular vaccine has been used already for Ebola. And this is an example of the AstraZeneca, Janssen, CanSino, and the Russian Gamaleya vaccine. Then we have the protein vaccines. This time, this contains small fragments of the SARS-CoV-2 virus that is recognized by the immune system. So it will generate the immune reaction because our immune system will recognize it as a foreign antigen, and thus you would have antibodies produced. This kind of vaccines have been used in the past for other diseases. So it has a good previous safety record. It's usually administered with an adjuvant or an immune booster to heighten the immune response. The examples that have already been used in humans are hepatitis B vaccine. And these are example of this are the Novavax and the Sanofi GSK vaccines, which we do not yet have in the Philippines. Now we'll go to the whole virus vaccines. So we have first the group of inactivated vaccines. These are those that contain the killed type of SARS-CoV-2 virus. So the killed virus is recognized by the immune system. So it's killed. It will not cause disease. And because it is a whole virus, you can generate many immune responses to different parts of the viral proteins. So this needs to be administered with an adjuvant to boost the immune response. Example is something that we're very familiar with is the influenza vaccine. And so this is a vaccine that has been here for quite some time. And in clinical trials and in the Philippines, we have the Sinovac and the Sinopharm vaccines. Then finally, we have the attenuated vaccines. These are also whole virus vaccines, but they contain a weakened virus. So it's not a killed virus, it's weakened, and it actually can trigger a good immune response. So this is actually quite an ideal vaccine because if it is just weakened, that it will not cause disease, but it can generate immune responses, the responses are quite good. So it's a well-known approach which requires time and extensive testing. And the immune reaction that ensues resembles the natural infection. So an example that you're all familiar with is the oral polio vaccine. And so an example that is in clinical trial is the Codagenics vaccine, which we still do not even have abroad. No? So this is still in the pipeline. So these are the different vaccines that you can possibly encounter. Maybe one day they will all be here in the Philippines. And you will see that maybe there may be some patients who would benefit from one over the other. So now let's go into the concept of vaccine efficacy versus vaccine effectiveness. So what do we mean when we hear the word efficacy? Efficacy means the percent reduction in the disease incidence in a vaccinated group compared to the unvaccinated group under optimal conditions. So what is this? This usually is computed based on a context of the clinical trial. So it is not in the real world. When we talk about vaccine effectiveness, this is the ability of the vaccine to prevent outcomes of interest in the real world. So it's important to differentiate this. Why? Because the computation of vaccine efficacy in one population, let's say they say that the vaccine efficacy of, let's say the Pfizer vaccine is 95% in the US, that may not translate to what we will have here in the Philippines because of many factors like racial differences, the context by which the vaccine trials were done. Was it done in the context of a lot of variants? Was it done in a population that was lower socioeconomic class versus a higher socioeconomic class? That's why it's very important that we eventually will have to gauge the vaccine choices based on the real world experience. So here are some vaccine efficacy rates of the available COVID-19 vaccines. So I listed here in a table the different types. Some of them we have in the Philippines. So far we've only had AstraZeneca and the Sinovac vaccine. And I think, well, unofficially, it's the Sinopharm was also here. But you could see that the efficacy rate versus severe disease. So what does that mean? The ability to prevent hospitalization or mortality or death is actually quite good for all of the vaccines. So it's almost 100% after the first dose. Okay, the Pfizer data actually showed 88.9% after the first dose. But overall efficacy rate, meaning the ability to prevent COVID-19 infections, you would see now a difference in them. No? So you see that we have the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines that are actually showing good efficacy, but this was done in the context of US trials. And you could see the AstraZeneca has 67%. Okay. Then we have the Gamaleya of 92%. We have the Sinovac, no, which was actually done, the trials were done in several countries, and you see a variety of efficacy rates because their population of each of these trials were different. So in Brazil, they really looked at healthcare workers only, the effect on healthcare workers, and it was not so good because the healthcare workers are really exposed to a high viral load, and that can affect the vaccine efficacy. But the WHO has actually pegged 50% vaccine efficacy rate to be sufficient for a vaccine to be called efficacious. Okay, so even though it's 50% for the healthcare worker, it can still be used. Then you see that in Indonesia, Turkey, they actually had better rates. Okay, so this is still ongoing. These efficacy rates will still be changing because many studies for the vaccines will last for 2 years. And so far, we're not even 1 year into using these vaccines, but because of the need, we are all under what we call EUA, Emergency Use Authority, wherein even the trials are not yet done because of the pressing need and the pandemic situation, we need to have the vaccines already. So now let's go into the adverse reactions. There are several types of adverse reactions. They can be either local, they can be systemic, they can be allergic, and there can be those that are due to the disease itself. So what we want to discuss now are two important reactions that we have to distinguish. And these are the reactogenic reactions versus allergic reactions. Okay, so our society really wants to help everybody understand this so that there's no fear in taking the vaccines. So the reactogenic reactions are those that have local reactions like swelling, pain, redness at the injection site, or systemic reactions like fever, chills, sometimes even vomiting and tiredness. These are considered mild to moderate reactions and are usually gone within 1 to 3 days. They are managed with paracetamol, pain relievers, hydration, and cold compresses. So how do these vaccine reactogenic reactions occur? This is because after injecting the vaccine, of course, you will generate a local immune reaction in the site of the injection. It is an inflammatory reaction. And in most patients, it will end in that type of reaction. But there are some patients whose immune system is so hyperreactive that this immune reaction or the inflammatory mediators can escape into the blood vessels and thus cause what we call systemic symptoms like fever, chills, fatigue, headache, abdominal pain, sometimes diarrhea, and these are still considered vaccine reactogenic reactions. So why would some people develop reactogenic reactions and why will some not develop? Well, there are several factors that can influence the development of these reactions. It can be either due to the vaccine itself or the way it was given, or to factors that involve the host itself. So the individual's experience during and after the vaccination can vary. And this is because of the different factors that can influence a particular person. So reactions to COVID-19 vaccines can occur, but not all reactions are allergic. Majority are what we call reactogenic, which is sort of expected in many vaccines. And reactogenic reactions are not the same as allergic reactions. So what is an allergy? It's an exaggerated immune response to a harmless substance. There are different mechanisms involved and symptoms, but what's important to remember is these type of reactions, the severe allergic reactions, are rare. if ever an allergic reaction may occur, it will be mild, such as rash, itchy skin, runny nose, sneezing, and these are managed with antihistamines. So the concern of many is the severe allergic reaction. And these are really quite rare. No? This is what we call anaphylaxis. Maybe some of you have experienced it after eating food or taking a medication, but you have to have 2 or more of these symptoms to qualify to have anaphylaxis. And this usually happens within the first 30 minutes after injection. But some patients may have a repeat course after within 1 to 4 hours. That's why you have to monitor a patient after vaccine for 30 minutes, and this is managed with epinephrine. So the incidence of this type of reactions, as I've given here, this example, is for Pfizer and Moderna. You see the number of cases versus the million shots that a patient may have. So they are really quite rare. So the World Allergy Organization Anaphylaxis Committee actually evaluated each COVID-19 vaccine to see its tendency to develop anaphylaxis. So here, I'm showing you some of the, especially those that pertain to our setting, the CoronaVac or Sinovac actually has no anaphylaxis event reported in their trials. But we have already been using this, and there really are some patients who have been reported to develop anaphylaxis here in the Philippines, but very, very rare. And you see there is a component inside the vaccine. It's not the virus that causes the allergy. It's possibly an excipient, something that's used for preserving the vaccine or enhancing the immune response. So the possible excipient is aluminum hydroxide. So if you've taken flu vaccines before and you have not, which contain aluminum hydroxide, then you will probably not react to the CoronaVac vaccine. Now we also have the Sinopharm. It's coming also. You could see that also it is quite similar to the CoronaVac. Now, what about the RNA vaccines? So in the clinical trials, no reaction or anaphylactic reaction has been reported. But in real life, you have seen that there is an incidence of 1 in 100,000 with routine use. These particular vaccines have been noted to be more reactogenic, meaning that they tend to have a more intense immune reaction on the second shot, unlike the Sinovac vaccine. So there is actually that polyethylene glycol that is present in these vaccines that is notorious for causing allergies. And this particular component is also found in certain cosmetics. It's also found in some laxatives and in certain chemotherapy drugs. So if you have a reaction to this, a specialist has to evaluate you first if you can actually take this type of vaccine. Now, we have also here the AstraZeneca vaccines. So in their trial, no anaphylaxis has been reported, but in our society, we have some reports of anaphylaxis. And the possible culprit is the polysorbate, which is used also as an adjuvant or an immune booster in the vaccine. Polysorbate
Marysia, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, so you have here the AstraZeneca and the Gamaleya vaccines, which contain polysorbate. And these are actually also found in other vaccines like hepatitis B vaccine, DPT vaccines, some flu vaccines. So if you are not allergic to these vaccines, then you will probably not react to these two types of vaccines. So who can now receive the COVID-19 vaccine? These are patients with allergies to food, inhalants, insect venom, those with atopic dermatitis, allergic asthma, it should be controlled, whether on inhaler or not, those with allergic rhinitis on intranasal sprays or not, those with urticaria or hives, and those with history of rashes to oral medications. So patients with depressed immune systems or those with autoimmune disease, there's still information lacking, but there's a potential for group of patients to receive the vaccines if they have been evaluated by their doctors, if their immune reactions would be adequate. So the concerns with this group is actually that maybe their immune response to the vaccine may be reduced. Who should not receive the COVID-19 vaccines? Okay, these are patients who got an immediate allergic reaction to their first dose of COVID-19 vaccine, whether mild to severe, or they've had a history of an allergic reaction to any component of the COVID-19 vaccine, like polyethylene glycol or polysorbate. So what do we mean by immediate allergic reactions? These are those that occur within 4 hours of receiving the vaccine. And this type of patients may be referred to the allergist for further evaluation and to see what kind of vaccine they may receive in the future. So this table actually can help everybody find the risk assessment. Okay, so many people are scared because they feel that just because they have allergies, they cannot receive the vaccines. Well, that is not true. So those who are low risk that can receive the vaccines without further workup are those with no history of allergic disease or previous severe general reactions, those who have allergic reactions to food, inhalants, insects, latex, oral meds not related to vaccine or their components, and those with well-controlled asthma and on inhaled steroids, and those with allergic rhinitis on intranasal steroids. So moderate risk are those with immune problems. They can receive the vaccine, but they have to be given proper advice about whether this vaccine will be effective or not, looking at the status of their immune system. Now, those with uncontrolled asthma or mast cell disorders, they have to receive the vaccine in a hospital setting because they can be at risk of anaphylaxis. So it would be good to control your allergies first before you have the vaccine. Now, those with an immediate reaction within 4 hours, such as urticaria, angioedema, difficulty breathing to other vaccines in the past or injected therapies, it would be good that you see an allergist so that they can evaluate you whether or not you can receive the vaccine. So here in this table, you would see that we have put our website, because in the website you will see the allergists. We have listed them down. We're only 132 around the country, but you can access them and try to schedule appointments. And of course, the high-risk group, those who should not receive the vaccine at all and possibly be referred to an allergist, are those with an immediate reaction, whether mild or severe, to the first dose of the COVID vaccine, and those with an allergic reaction to any of the COVID vaccine excipients, okay, or the components of the COVID vaccine like polysorbate, polyethylene glycol, and aluminum hydroxide. So, who are those that need further evaluation by a specialist if they can receive the COVID-19 vaccine? Patients who had an immediate allergic reaction to other vaccines and injectables, and if they are vaccinated, they should be observed for at least 30 minutes. So this slide actually is given to the doctors or the vaccinators who will give the vaccines, and to help them, we have distributed this to all the way to the grassroots level through the DOH to help our healthcare workers recognize which kind of allergic reaction is something that is mild and those that are severe, and how to manage them accordingly. So these are my summary statements and the summary statements of our society. COVID-19 continues to be a global pandemic affecting not only health, but quality of life and socioeconomic conditions. Vaccines enable the entire population to achieve herd immunity. Many vaccines in the market have achieved WHO standards of vaccine efficacy of at least 50%, which is sufficient to achieve herd immunity. Vaccines must be evaluated for efficacy and safety in well-designed clinical trials before use in the general population. However, due to the present emergency situation, COVID vaccine utilization preceded the outcome of the clinical trials. Vaccine efficacy may not be the same as vaccine effectiveness. Reaction to COVID-19 vaccines may happen, but majority are local or systemic side effects that will disappear within 1 to 3 days. Mild allergic reactions are managed with antihistamines. Anaphylaxis is rare and is managed with epinephrine. Patients with allergy to food, inhalant allergens, Insects and those with stable bronchial asthma or other allergies can receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Patients who should not be vaccinated are those who've had an allergic reaction to the first dose of any COVID-19 vaccine and their components such as polyethylene glycol or polysorbate. Patients who had an allergic reaction to other vaccines and injectable medicines should be referred to an allergist for further evaluation. Patients should be monitored at least 30 minutes after vaccination, so we should not insist on going home right away after the vaccine. And based on current data, the benefits of receiving the COVID-19 vaccine far outweighs the risk of an allergic reaction. So we have to realize that, example, the Pfizer mRNA vaccine has shown 5 reactions, 5 anaphylaxis in 1 million shots. But it is 100 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than to have that serious allergic reaction to the vaccine. So I'll end my talk with this statement that the best vaccine, if you ask me, is the one that is immediately available. So we should already strive to be vaccinated so that we reach herd immunity and hopefully our lives will go on as before. So thank you very much for your attention.
All right, Marysia, thank you so much. That last statement of yours, the best vaccine is the one that is available, is what government keeps telling us right now. Let's go back to the first vaccines that arrived. These were the Sinovac vaccines. Many of the healthcare workers were expecting Pfizer. That's why they all signed up. And then when they found out it was Sinovac, there were a number of healthcare workers, doctors and nurses who backed out. Maybe you can tell us, I'll start the first question. Why is there, or why was there a hesitancy among healthcare workers not to be vaccinated with Sinovac?
Okay, that's actually a good question. You know, I was part of the PGH group. We were actually the ones who were told that we were going to be vaccinated with Pfizer, and suddenly the next thing we know, it was already Sinovac. Well, the reason why many healthcare workers were hesitant is because of the inability of Sinovac or the company to provide the medical data that we needed for the clinical trials. You know, China has this different way of conducting their trials. They're not very disclosed. They don't really disclose too much, no? Not like in the US and in Europe, they really show all the data. So in Sinovac, it was so secretive. And they actually showed it, of course, to our experts. Like in FDA, there was vaccine expert panels that actually reviewed it, but it was not readily available to many medical doctors. So there was this distrust. And I think I have to say also that there's a bit of colonial mentality, that Chinese products might not be as good as that of Western products. But what happened was, because Pfizer was not there, I think a lot of the doctors suddenly changed their minds, because it was more important for them to be vaccinated than to think of this. Because in reality, the studies of Sinovac showed the 50% efficacy for doctors. And that was already sufficient for the doctors. But if you look at it, the FDA said they don't recommend it for the doctors because it's quite low. But it can be used for healthy people who are not faced with a lot of patients. But for us, we had to take it because the risk of catching the COVID was higher than getting any side effect from the vaccine.
Okay, thank you for that. There's a number of questions already. There's a lot, actually. So let's go to this question from Ray Rojas Chua. What characteristics make people more susceptible to the cytokine storm, the one you were discussing earlier during your presentation?
So they really don't know yet why some people would go into that kind of reaction. And they are thinking, many experts are looking into genetics. Okay? And second is viral load. So it's the amount of virus that a person is exposed to, plus the tendency for that patient to have a dysfunctional immune response. Because there are people really who respond very violently to certain exposures, no? That's why you'll see some people have mild disease and some people have severe disease. So what exact parameters will really tell us that you will go into cytokine storm? So far, they have found that maybe It could be you have a comorbid disease like diabetes or maybe hypertension or asthma that makes your immune system a little bit not balanced when you respond to foreign threats. So, and also not to mention if you got a lot of the virus. So if you got a lot viral load, you can actually have a more severe reaction.
From Lawrence, would you need to get vaccinated every year? Can you mix and match vaccines? Example, Sinovac this year, Pfizer the following year.
Okay, so far there are no data that you can mix and match the vaccines, okay, as of now. So we're not saying it cannot happen, but the data now shows that you have to stick with the same vaccine. If you got the first shot, you have to try the second shot of the same vaccine unless you reacted to the first dose. So I'm sorry, Pinky, what was the other question aside?
It was the same example, Sinovac this year and then Pfizer next year.
We cannot mix match, and whether we need to take it annually, they are not yet also sure because the length of time that the antibodies stay in our system is not yet determined because they're still in clinical trials. So they're surmising it may be like the flu vaccine, wherein we may have to take it annually.
I'll do a follow-up on that because there are different vaccines that are developed in a similar way, such as you mentioned a while ago. Pfizer and Moderna do the genetic vaccine, right? So can you do Pfizer and then do a follow-up with Moderna it seems that the development stage was the same.
In the US, they are doing it. Okay, they are doing that. They're mixing it because the platform, they call it the vaccine platform, is the same. Okay. So that's because even there, they have a scarcity sometimes of the vaccine. So they just want to make sure that everybody gets the second dose. So there, they were able to do it. But for us, we have Astra and Sinovac, which are not the same platform. So we really cannot make the same conclusions.
From Raven, would you recommend these vaccinations for pregnant women or to hold off first after a 2-year trial, but I'm not pregnant, just curious?
Okay, so the Philippine Obstetric Society actually say that you can have the vaccine as long as you're not in your first trimester. Okay, this is actually also true for the other vaccines like the flu vaccine. You can have it when you're pregnant. So if you are really sigurista, might as well wait for the 2 years first of the clinical trials and get pregnant because, really nobody can tell. We are using the vaccines now because there's the need of controlling the diseases there versus the possible side effects later.
From Leah Caringal, what vaccine is best for immunocompromised patients, including 65-year-old and above and cancer survivors?
Okay, so far, the vaccine that has a lot of patients tried in the elderly is the Astra vaccine. Okay, but for cancer and immunocompromised patients, there is no vaccine that is the best. Okay, we actually try to stay away from the live vaccines, but remember, these are not live vaccines. Even the whole virus is killed or what we call weakened. So if you have cancer, if your cancer is stable, meaning that you're in remission and your immune reaction is quite good, you can receive the vaccine. But you have to consult your doctor, your oncologist to tell you, is your immune system strong enough to receive it? So the problem is not whether you will react to it. No, the question is you may not react to it and you might not actually generate immunity. That's the fear in patients with immune problems.
So it might be ineffective.
Yes, not that it will cause something, but it might not work enough. The immune reaction will not be generated.
And just to be clear on that, on the 65-year-old and above, the seniors, AstraZeneca is the more preferred vaccine. Is that what you said?
Only because there are clinical trials. Big clinical trials in this group. But right now, what I know is the other vaccines are also now being studied in the elderly.
Yeah, I'll do a follow-up on that because I found out that Novavax, it's still on its 3rd clinical trial. They call it a 2nd-generation vaccine. Novavax is developed in the US, but will be manufactured in India. So is it more effective or is it safer that we have these so-called 2nd-generation vaccines because they seem to know and have a possible cure on the past virus, knowing that it's evolving?
I think it's called that only because there's a collaboration between the discovery and the manufacturing. So I'm not too familiar about that. It's not in my specialty, sorry. But if that's the basis of having the word second generation, it may be because it is done or created because of two different areas that are collaborating. That's what I can say.
From Hershey Coronado, hi, I have RID. Is it safe for me to be vaccinated, especially I am Cat 1, 2, and 5 positive? Will this affect my treatment or will it increase NK cells? I plan to undergo IVF by January 2022.
Okay, I think the one who's asking it has a reproductive immunology problem.
Disorder.
Get pregnant. Okay, so the problem with this kind of conditions is autoimmunity. So it is actually under the blanket of autoimmune conditions, wherein it will not hamper you from getting the vaccine. Okay, the vaccine will not change your immune reactions to that particular part of your immune reaction. No? So if you want to have the vaccine and get pregnant later on and have IVF, there's really no studies that will show that it will interfere with your treatment later on.
This was already answered, but maybe we can ask it again from Christine Ong. For elderly in their 90s, which vaccine would you recommend?
Well, I would, as I mentioned, it's the Astra vaccine that has studies. So anecdotally, I'm a doctor. My father is a doctor. He was with UPPGH. He's 91, and he received the Astra vaccine 2 weeks ago, and he's fine. He was the one who had no reaction. So in fact, the elderly seem not to react as much as the younger people. Everybody was having fever and all. He was like, maybe my immune system is not working anymore. But he had the vaccine and he responded very well.
Okay. Some confidence there at least to give to the senior citizens. So that's again, sorry, Astra. Did you say Astra?
Astra.
Yeah, okay. So from Sunny's Clark, hi, I have RJD, rheumatic joint disease. I am ongoing vaccination every 28 days. Will it be safe for me to get vaccinated by the COVID vaccines?
Okay, so I think you're taking some monoclonal antibodies. Now, this is a kind of biologic treatment that, well, it has an immune reaction also. So what experts are recommending is that if you're on this type of treatment, you would have to discuss it with your doctor, because it may be that you have to stop that kind of treatment first for a month or so prior to receiving the vaccine, because it might interfere with the immune reaction. So maybe temporarily you'll have to take some tablets, no? Something that will not interfere with the immune reaction.
From page U, hi, how about the blood clot issue of AstraZeneca? Is this part of anaphylaxis? Is it recommended if we get an allergic skin test first for polyethylene glycol polysorbate before we get the vaccine? Thanks.
Okay, so I might forget some of the points.
Okay, let's start with, how about the blood clot issue of AstraZeneca?
So that story is so, for me, it's quite funny because I was so busy, I couldn't have the Sinovac vaccine. So I was ready to get Sinovac, but for some reason, it was Astra that was available when I decided to vaccinate. And that same day, that story came out. So I was all geared up to have the vaccine. So I was like stressing out, no? And when we started reading about it, we have seen that so far they have seen no relationship between the clotting issues and the injection of Astra vaccine. And this is because in Europe, there were a few reported cases. And when they found out, they computed it versus the number of cases that would really appear in the general population, whether they are vaccinated or not. So it was no different. So these people really may have had a tendency to get clotting problems, not related to the vaccine, but because of other factors. Were they smokers? Were they taking oral contraceptives? Did they have other, risk factors for clotting? So right now, the Europeans stopped it that time. They stopped it for, I think, a week. Then they had a group of experts evaluating the data, and now they gave already the signal that there's no relationship. So don't fear about the coagulation problems and the vaccine. Okay. Then I think, what was the other one?
Is this part of anaphylaxis?
No, it is not. Okay, so clotting problems have not been attributed to the vaccine, and also the anaphylactic reaction does not involve clotting. Okay, it is more of respiratory, gastrointestinal, skin. Those are usually the symptoms for anaphylaxis.
Is it recommended if we get an allergic test first for polyethylene glycol, polysorbate, before we get the vaccine?
Okay, unfortunately, there is no such test available. So even though you go to any place in the world, they don't have it readily. So what we do is if you have had a past reaction to vaccines, we ask you, have you had a reaction to this kind of vaccine which contains this? If you had a polysorbate containing vaccine, then we sort of can recommend another kind of vaccine. Unfortunately, in our setting, it's only 2 choices. But I think in the future, we will have more options, no? And possibly just skirt around the issue. Just choose products that do not contain the polyethylene glycol or polysorbate for the patient.
So to give an update on that, we're receiving 400,000 additional Sinovac vaccines, I believe tomorrow. 1 million on Monday. And then in April, we're expecting 2 million from Gamaleya Sputnik V. What are your thoughts on Gamaleya Sputnik V?
Well, the Gamaleya actually published their data. And, for us doctors, publication of data is something that really shows that the manufacturers are serious and upfront with their product. And so far, Gamaleya has shown good results. In fact, if you look at the vaccine efficacy table, it's actually 90+%. So it's almost like the Pfizer Moderna type, no? But it is the vector vaccine, okay? So it also hasn't been used much in human population. It's sort of like the same principle by which Astra works. So I think the Gamaleya is a good option. It's our 3rd option coming, and I think we should be open to that.
From Richard Q, is there a blood test to check if you're allergic to the vaccine?
No, there's none. Hello, Richard.
From Hershey Coronado, I heard that some vaccine brands have coagulation properties. May I ask if this is safe? Is this safe for trying to conceive patients?
Oh, okay. Because I think some patients have the APAS, no, these antiphospholipid antibodies, which put you at that give you the tendency to clot, no, when you're pregnant. But these vaccines do not contain that increased tendency for coagulation. So let's not put that together. Now, just for disclosure, maybe to put you at ease, I'm also an APAS person. I've also had APAS before, and I had the Astra vaccine, and I'm fine.
But you only got the first dose, no, Marysia?
First dose pa lang.
What's your second dose?
Well, we're waiting for the second batch. So I think what they want is to vaccinate everyone first with the first batch, and then we'll sometime in May, I think May or June, we'll be having our second dose.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, from Audrey Tanco Uy, is the autoimmune APAS moderately at risk?
No, it's not. It's in the moderate. Yes, it is under autoimmunity, but really it's not considered high risk. You don't need to check whether your APAS is active or not to have the vaccine. It's not connected at all to the coagulopathy.
From Sammy, hello, is it true that people with diabetes can't be vaccinated? Oh,
that's actually contrary to the truth, not that the diabetics, the hypertensives, those with chronic diseases are the third tier in the target for vaccination because their immune systems are the weaker ones, and they're the ones who need to be vaccinated. So yes, there's no problem for diabetics to have it. They should be actually in the top of the list.
No risk whatsoever.
No.
Okay. From Barry Sumpio, are the vaccine, which was discovered earlier, have the efficacy to the recent COVID strands? UK variant, South African variant, P.3 variant.
Yeah, we even have our Philippine variant, of course.
P.3, right?
Yes, but so far, initially there was a concern, right, for the Astra vaccine not being as efficacious for the South African variant, no? But right now, I came across an article that showed that whatever vaccine you receive will generate an immune reaction against many kinds of variants. So now it's appearing that you don't really have to choose a vaccine. As long as you get vaccinated, you will develop antibodies that can potentially address all the variants. So we don't have to worry that, okay, I'm getting a substandard vaccine because it's not, it hasn't been tested. But Sinovac, I think, and Astra have been tested during the period of the variants. The Moderna and the Pfizer, they're the ones that haven't been tested during period of variant. So, you know, many of my friends are into, oh, I want to get the Moderna. It's coming. I'm going to get the Moderna. I said, yeah, are you sure? Because during that period they developed it, there were no variants yet. So now that they have to tweak it to make it better. So, you know, this is how the vaccines are developed. I think really the important thing is we just get a vaccine, and we will develop an immunity somehow.
But then that goes back to my earlier question. The vaccines that come in later, who are on second or third clinical trials, can't they tweak their vaccines to be able to withstand these new variants?
So far, the only vaccines that can be tweaked are those with genetic vaccines. So the whole virion types, the China vaccines, and even the vector, there's a possibility because they inject the genetic material into the another virus. But really, it's just the mRNA vaccines that can potentially be tweaked, and I think are being tweaked already.
A lot of the questions are about eligibility to take the vaccine given certain conditions. So from Shale Albao, what pre-existing disorders, illnesses should a person have to be disqualified from taking the vaccine? I guess process of elimination.
Well, you just remember in my the risk assessment table I showed you that the only group that cannot receive the vaccine are those who've had a reaction to the first dose of the COVID vaccine or have had a previous reaction to a component of the vaccine. So in other words, you'll not really know. You'll not really know because you're going to take the first dose and you'll have to just be monitored 30 minutes after. That's why we have to remember that these vaccines are in clinical trial, okay? So if we decide to do it, we actually are signing a waiver that we know that what we're getting into is not yet in completed trials. It's not even FDA registered yet. They are under what we call EUA. So we go into the vaccine with eyes wide open, okay? That we know that we're going to do this because we have to contribute to herd immunity. It's a social responsibility already. Okay, many people are thinking, okay, let them all go ahead and I'll be the last. Well, if we all think that way, then we will never achieve herd immunity.
Okay. How long, from Hershey, how long will the vaccine last in a human body? And the next question, which you answered, should I take it in yearly frequency? So I guess the earlier question, how long will the vaccine last in the human body?
Well, so far, the studies have shown around 3 to 4 months of being maintained in the body, but only because the trials are still ongoing. So we will know this answer when the trials are completed after 2 years. So we're only, I think, approaching the first year. Most vaccines started in July 2020. So the study started then, and so we're just approaching year one. So far, the theory is that it may be annual, just like the flu shot, because the flu shot is annually given because it mutates, the virus mutates, and the COVID virus following a mutation pattern also that is typical for viruses. So baka talagang every year they have to change the kind of vaccine that is given to us.
How important is the second shot?
Okay, it's very important because for most of the vaccines, because the clinical trials have shown that when you inject the second shot, you boost the immune response. Okay, because you can actually have a certain degree of immunity after 2 weeks from the first shot. You will have a certain degree, but the maximum potential will be on the second shot. Okay, to reach the highest. But the J&J vaccine is the quite unique one that one shot is enough for them to sustain. So it's a very promising vaccine.
From Enrico de Silva, what type of vaccine is more approachable or measurable? One for this kind of disease.
Measurable in what
Measurable
sense?
one for this kind of virus. Which type of vaccine?
I don't understand what kind of measure. Are you saying that can you measure the immunity to the vaccine? Maybe, I don't know. But so far, there are really no gauge. There's no gauge except to see, that you will actually be protected to a certain extent, because most of the vaccines will not prevent you from developing the infection. Okay, it is against the severe disease. The reality of the vaccine is not that you will never get it. You may get it, but it may be very mild or asymptomatic. That's the aim. And that you do not have to go to the hospital. So if you ask me, is that the measure of how good the vaccine is? That would be it. Now, there are some who want to measure their antibody levels. Am I strong enough? Did I generate enough antibodies? There's still no test yet available, really, although St. Luke's claims to have a neutralizing antibody test, but it is not standard to test yourself after the vaccination.
From Edward Lim, I've been hearing a lot about this. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Is ivermectin a substitute for the vaccine?
Oh my gosh, that's such a hot thing. We are all, well, anyway, no, okay. Ivermectin is an anti-parasitic drug, okay? It's actually a deworming agent used in veterinary practice, but there's also some use for it in humans for river blindness in Africa. So it also is an anti-parasitic drug. So there are some anecdotal reports and also small clinical trials that show a promise. But some people are saying that this is the solution instead of vaccinating. And that is not the same. Because remember, vaccination has a long-term effect. It will give you immunity for a long period of time after 1 or 2 doses. But the ivermectin, if it really has a reaction, it has to be given continuously and indefinitely, because COVID is here to stay.
And if you say continuously, for
like a maintenance medication.
Okay. From Enrico de Silva, what will be the advantage of a person who will avail this vaccine? Are we going to do a lab test first before having a vaccination? First 2 questions.
No need to have a lab test before this. But what is the benefit? Wow, the benefits are a lot, not only with your health, but also with the economy. So I know all of you here are, in the business sector, and that it is very important that economy goes on, because we cannot be on lockdowns. We cannot stop our work. We are social human beings. We also need it for our mental health. So the benefits of having the vaccine really outweigh the risk of these reactions that we're concerned about.
Follow-up question from Enrico de Silva. How will a vaccinated person manage the side effect of the vaccine?
Okay, so if you are, all vaccinees will have to wait for 30 minutes after the vaccination, depending upon your risk. In certain vaccine centers, it's only 15 minutes if you are not high risk for allergy. So they kind of watch you for 30 minutes, and in 30 minutes, Most of the time, if this is anaphylaxis, the one you cannot breathe, you have allergy, then they have to give you epinephrine, and they'll give you some anti-allergy medications. Then they'll have to say that the next dose you cannot have, and we have to see if you can receive another dose. Now, for those who develop the fever, the chills, we just have to take some biogesic, paracetamol, rest, drink water, and wait it out, because it will go away in 1 to 3 days. So if you're asking me, did I get a reaction? No, I didn't, but I got a pain on the site that lasted for more than a week. Okay, so I still have it a bit, no? But those who have suffered some symptoms like that, the fever, that is actually not a severe reaction, okay? And you can receive your second dose.
From Andrea Ignacio, are all the vaccines safe for pregnant women, or will the vaccines affect chances of getting pregnant?
So, right now, the experts, the OB experts are saying that you can have the vaccine if you want to, but in the second trimester already. You skip the first trimester. But will it be totally safe? Nobody, again, really knows, because it's still under clinical trial. But there are people within the vaccination trial who got pregnant. And so far, they have not received any complaints about abnormalities in the children when they were. In fact, there was this, I don't know if some of you have read it, that there was this baby who was born from a vaccinated mother in the US, and the baby had already had antibodies.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a good thing.
Okay, from Erica Aguete. Hi, Dr. Recto. Number 1, will a person show positive in the swab test if one has already done the first vaccination?
You will not for the PCR test. No, you will not, because the PCR test will test for viral fragments. Okay, so you're not going to be positive for that, but you can be positive for the antibody. Okay, because your immune system generated the antibody. So it's really still controversial, no? There's some people who develop COVID after the vaccine, the first dose. We've had some doctors who, after vaccine, 3 days later had COVID. So people think it's connected to the vaccine, but actually they were already incubating the virus, and they just happened to have the vaccination, and they're recovering. Okay, so whether it will affect PCR, so far there is no evidence for that.
Second question, is there a recommended time to do a swab test after vaccination? Is this even recommended?
No, we don't recommend that. No, because you remember, what is injected is not a live virus. Okay, it's actually fragments of the virus, and the immune reaction that ensues is because of that exposure, no, the exposure to a killed part of the virus. So you cannot test it, and there's no rationale to swab yourself, okay, unless you have symptoms, no. So as I said, some patients may develop COVID because they were already incubating after the virus, and you have the symptoms of COVID, then you have to swab. And then if you have it, then you know that it's not really because of the virus, but because of you probably were exposed prior to vaccination.
So another question from Erica is, can a COVID-19 patient be inoculated by a vaccine at the time when he or she is positive? So you're positive, can you get vaccinated?
Well, the experts now, these are the infectious disease experts, actually say that it would be good that you get well first from the virus, okay? And sometimes you have to actually wait, no, for a period of around 3 months before you get a vaccine. So if you have had COVID and you just got it, it's better to wait, okay?
Yeah.
Because your immune system is still not stabilized. No, it's better to wait and around 3 months to have the vaccine.
And isn't it true, Marysia, that you have the antibodies for about 3 months? Is that true?
Yes, that's right. That's right. So you are actually protected naturally. You have the natural immunity already. So you are not at risk. So you just wait. Just wait.
Wait 3 months. From
Yes.
Christine Zapanta, for those who may have missed it, I'll ask it again. Are all the vaccines safe for pregnant women?
Wow, there are many people who want to get pregnant, it seems, no? As I said, the first trimester is the period that you avoid according to the Philippine Obstetrics and Gynecology Society. So if you want to really have the vaccine, let's say you are in a high-risk situation, then you wait till the second trimester.
From Christine Fernandez, is it okay to give vaccine to patients with SJS, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, and patients with MVP, mitral valve prolapse?
Okay, mitral valve prolapse is a structural problem in the heart. So it has nothing to do with a vaccine or immune reaction. So there's no problem with that. Now for Stevens-Johnson syndrome, this usually occurs because of a reaction to a drug in the past. And these drugs are not the same as the contents of the COVID-19 vaccine. So if you have had SJS in the past, it's best to see an allergist so that they can evaluate whether there is some connection between the drug that caused you to have SJS and the vaccine.
This is from Samantha. What are your thoughts on pregnant women taking the vaccine? You've answered that a couple of times, but she says there are two schools of thoughts. Actually, some gynecologists in the US are actively telling their pregnant clients to vaccinate.
Well, I only go with the local guidelines. You know, sometimes the guidelines, I don't know what their guidelines are in the US, but what I know, our colleagues here do not advise it in the first trimester.
From San Jamir Joseph, if there will be severe allergic reaction after getting the first dose, when will the person be eligible to take another vaccine shot? How many days?
Okay, we do not know that yet. Okay, because if they reacted to the first dose, allergic reaction to the first dose, we don't recommend the same vaccine to be given, the booster of that. So if they will have to receive a second vaccine, there's still no data on that. So I cannot share that, sorry.
From Jade, how to address anxieties prior to having vaccinated?
Ray. Ray, you know, we just have to realize, as I said, the last one of my last statements was, it's 100 times more possible for you to get COVID versus that risk of developing that allergic reaction. So would you rather have the COVID or would you rather live in your bubble? That's a question you have to ask yourself. So nobody can convince you, but we are really hoping that everybody get vaccinated the soonest because we want to go on. Now we want to get out already of this situation, and this is one of our only hopes.
From Zian, hi, if the person has history of pneumothorax last 2006 and currently has plebs in the lungs, is it safe to get vaccinated? And the second question is, so let's answer that first, Marysia. Why don't you answer the first question?
So I think that it's not a problem. Okay, it's another condition that is not going to be affected by vaccine.
How about someone epileptic?
No problem. It's best that the epilepsy get controlled though. Okay, so as long as she's on maintenance, I think that would not also be a problem.
From Edward, a lot of people are afraid to take the vaccine because of the stigma of dengue vaccine. How should we react to convince these people to take the vaccine?
Okay, yeah, that really affected a lot of us. No, the vaccine acceptance went down because of the dengue vaccine scare. Well, it's different. Okay, the vaccine of the dengue vaccine was a live vaccine, live attenuated versus what we have now. So the tendency for it to cause antibody dependent enhancement, that is what happened with the dengue vaccine, the potential to do that is not possible with the vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccines. No, what happened with the dengue vaccine was the signals were there already in the clinical trials. There was already some evidence that it caused harm in a certain population, yet it was used in mass vaccination without looking at that group that could potentially be harmed. So, and it was just done so haphazardly. So now, before that happened, now with the COVID vaccines, it's now being evaluated, okay, properly, that there are no groups so far that would be high risk except for those who have an allergic reaction to the vaccine component. So we should not be worried that it's another dengue vaccine too.
Okay, from Carlos Kimbo, are the 2 doses needed the exact same shot? In other words, if we ordered Moderna, do we take the same second shot from the same batch, or do we wait for a different batch for the second shot?
It would not matter what batch it is, because these vaccines have been studied for batch to batch sameness, no? So I don't think you have to be worried that you have to take the same batch. No, we can actually use 2 batches of whatever vaccine that we decide to use.
From Ian, there's a recommendation to suspend vaccination for now because it might only fuel the transmission and promote more mutations and resistance to vaccination. Another recommendation is withholding vaccination of the 20 to 40-year-olds to reduce the rate of developing vaccine resistance. What are your thoughts on these?
Okay, I think I know where that statement came from. It was made by a very controversial doctor. Okay, and in vaccinology, I'm not a vaccinologist, but in vaccinology, so far they have not seen that. It's not a drug. Okay, you get the resistance to drugs when you take it indiscriminately and not properly. But for vaccine resistance, so far there's no evidence for that. If ever, it would be a lack, maybe a bit lack of efficacy if the strain is different. Okay, but it's not like a total non-response. So that is a concern that is theoretical and it has not been proven.
From Leo, can a high enough COVID viral load still trigger a deadly fatal response even when one has already been vaccinated?
So far, the studies show that the protective rate for severe infections in whatever group is 100%. So whether or not you had a low viral load or a high viral load, the protection for all the vaccines was 100% for severe disease. So I think that would answer the question.
What would be the best vaccine for someone who already contracted the virus in the past year?
I cannot answer that. I don't think we have the data yet for that. So, abangan.
Okay. From Mac De Castro, MC De Castro, I have cardiomyopathy and was hospitalized last year due to COVID-19 and have survived. However, during my hospitalization, I was diagnosed for diabetes. Can I take the vaccines? You're on mute.
Why did it suddenly go on mute? So yes, you can have that vaccine.
From Karen, is it safe to get vaccinated? The person who has history of PTB, pulmonary tuberculosis, last 2018 or 2019. Thank you.
Yes, you can. Yes. You know, Pinky, there's a lot of questions about comorbid diseases. So what I can help everyone so that they can have a reference is to go to our website. No, I'm going to put it here because we seem to be having repeated questions. So maybe that they can look at the website and see if they qualify. So I'll just type it in the chat box.
Meanwhile, Pinky, we have 5 minutes left. Marysia.
Okay, I still have a lot of questions. From Erica, I heard the vaccines have a recommended time of administration for it to be effective. Will the vaccine still work if a person wasn't able to take the second dose on time due to delay in the supply distribution?
Okay, so you know, vaccines will have a certain degree of immunity with the first shot. You will generate that. Now, that immunity doesn't just wane. It can stay for several months. They just don't know how long. So the usual time period to have in between is around 3 months. That's why the Astra vaccine has been studied in the UK, that they gave everyone first the vaccine, and then they even waited for 3 months just so that everybody gets the first shot. And then that's you can take the second without a problem in diminishing immunity. Now, of course, you cannot take it naman 1 year later, no? Because they don't really know how long these antibodies will last in the system. So I guess all of this will be answered when the trials are over.
I'm going to have to skip through some of the questions. I think been answered. From Diana Uy, can people who take diabetes, hypertension, heart maintenance meds take the vaccine? Which vaccine is best for them?
For diabetes?
Who take diabetes, hypertension, and heart maintenance meds.
Oh, there's not a problem. You have to have a controlled, you have to have controlled diseases when you have the vaccine. That's the very important thing.
From Arnold, should we submit ourselves first to COVID test prior to taking the vaccine? What will happen if just in case the person who will take the vaccine is positive already or currently in the developing stage? Will it waste the vaccine?
No, it will not waste the vaccine, but really you are going to develop your own immunity anyway. So we don't know if it will be boosting like you had the vaccine and then you had COVID, but it's not going to make the COVID worse. If that's your concern. If you got the vaccine and you got COVID, it just means that you did not get protected yet, because it takes around 2 weeks for the immunity to set in before you can say you're at least a bit protected from the vaccine.
I think it's the same question from Frida. So I'm going to go to Anne. Hi, Miss Mary. I have a 7-year-old daughter. Can she also be vaccinated? Is there a vaccine for the younger generation?
So far, it hasn't been tested in children. So the youngest, Pfizer, is 16 years old. No, they've tested in 16, but the others are 18 and above. So there's no studies yet in children.
If someone has autoimmune disease, is the viral vector vaccine better for them than the RNA vaccine?
Nobody really knows. Okay, it's actually the same principle. It's just that the vector vaccine has a messenger versus the other one that has a direct inoculation of the genetic material. So nobody really knows which is better. Right now, we cannot position any vaccine to say that it's better in a certain group, with the exception of Astra for the elderly.
Okay, I think we're gonna have to say goodbye because they're thanking me and you. I think we have to go. Maybe one last question. I'll pick one. Okay, here. A person who had survived COVID has already developed antibody against the virus. Can a COVID survivor choose not to be vaccinated? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. We don't know, because we don't know how long COVID immunity will really last. So we are still monitoring. There's a lot of studies now going on at the length of time the COVID antibodies that are generated by natural infections, how long they will last. But the theory is like, it may be like the flu, wherein when you get the flu, your immunity will be for a few months and then it will come, you lose it. So how long, we still don't know. So ayan, another abangan.
Okay, so there is a survey. Leah, Edward, can you help me with this?
Yes, it's being flashed on the screen now. It's done. We're good.
Okay, Marysia, thank you. I learned so much.
Thank you so much, Pinky, also. And thank you to everyone for being so enthusiastic with your questions. Thank you.
And sorry for those questions that were not asked. Leah had been timing us and we really have to say goodbye. We overtime na ata tayo. So thank you, everyone. Edward, thanks a lot. Leah, thank you also.
Thanks. Thanks, Victoria.